Today's show, an interesting story out of Colorado. Interesting why? Well, it's interesting because you have to ask what the motives would be, and only people such as ourselves would know exactly what's going on here. Now, it's not bizarre enough that we have science to tell us that it's okay and normal for a truck to be loaded with human heads, which are severed, and put into boxes, almost like out of a scene from the movie Seven. But then we have a thief that would steal a box of human heads. I don't know which is more bizarre, using science, because we know they use science and they use these other fronts, such as organ donations and things like that. They really use it for harvesting and trafficking and all these satanic rituals that they do. But they say, well, it's in the name of science, and I'll show you that in a second. But we had a truck filled with heads parked on the side of the road. Keep that in mind next time you see a truck parked on the side of the road and you're thinking, well, it's probably got appliances in it, maybe a mattress, or maybe it just has some human skulls inside, because this kind of stuff is going on everywhere. And then the news anchors and the people who hear these stories, they say, why in the world would somebody steal a truck of severed heads? I don't know. Could there be a ritual going on?
Why would anyone want to steal a box of human heads? That's the question all of us are asking tonight after the box intended for medical research just vanished. And there's no sign of the thief who took that box from a medical van Thursday morning. It was parked at 23rd and Syracuse Street, and that's where we find Michaelia White. She is live there for us this evening. And Michaelia, this is in the middle of Denver's Central Park neighborhood.
Right, and this neighborhood is home to many families with young children, and there are plenty of schools in this area. So when we talk to people who live here, they were shocked that something like this could happen in their backyard.
It's the type of headline that you might see on like The Onion, I feel like, you know. I read it over and was sort of like, is this real?
Kevin Channel isn't the only one scratching his head, trying to digest what happened here on Thursday. Someone broke into a freight company's truck in broad daylight and stole a box that contained human heads intended for medical research. The blue and white box was labeled exempt human specimen.
I couldn't wrap my head around what you could possibly try to do with something like that if you were intentionally going to steal that.
Channel says the neighborhood is family friendly, and he brings his pup Roberta to this nearby park often. Karen Goodson also walks in the area all the time.
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
Goodson says weird doesn't even begin to describe the brazen and horrific crime.
I thought it was horrible. I would donate body parts for science, and for someone to steal them, this steals from us all, and it desecrates these people.
Both are puzzled by what would compel someone to do this.
I don't really know what to think of it, to be honest. I sort of hope it was a mistake. My guess is they thought they were stealing some sort of expensive medical equipment or something worth some value, not cadavers.
And police say even if the culprit threw that box away and you find it, you are asked to call Crime Stoppers. In Denver, Michaelia White, covering Colorado First.
Oh, okay. So, of course, they're like, why in the world would they do that? And then the narrative becomes what? Oh, well, clearly, somebody must have told them there were gold bars inside of the boxes, right? So without opening the box first and saying, what am I stealing here, right? Apparently, people just target trucks. They're like, I'm going to take whatever's in the truck, like this is Sopranos, and we're going to take it, and then we're going to resell it on the black market. Oh, well, in this case, they didn't even look in the box. They were assuming it was something really, really worthwhile, and they ended up with human heads. I don't think so. Obviously, this is what happens when people want to perform rituals. They take these organs and they do those types of things because these are things that are involved in rituals. And they say, well, what are you talking about? A severed head, they'd use it for a ritual? Or, you know, I don't know. Why don't we just look at our government officials, right? How about we look at George Bush, John Kerry, the Rockefellers, some of these people who went to Yale University. They were members of Skull and Bones, right? And what is Skull and Bones known for, other than, you know, using a skull and bones, other than, you know, creating world events to destroy the world around us, creating fear and propaganda to turn the nations across the world on one another? Well, they also have on display Geronimo's bone and skull, of course. You remember Geronimo? Yeah, Geronimo. They stole his skull and head. Because that's, normal to do for political leaders in power. Yeah, real normal. Now, they're telling us that these heads were on their way to a science place, right? Science place. But really, what do you even call these places? It's called Science Care, a program that where people donate bodies to science to help improve specific research and education. Well, here's a clip from this place called Science Care. And if this doesn't look like a front, I don't know what does.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your attention. It's time to get you on board and ready for your lab experience. We know you have many choices among lab training facilities, so thank you for choosing Science Care. Before we begin, there are a few important safety instructions to go over. If you've not already done so, please fill out the waiver of release and liability located at the front desk in the lobby. Please note photography and recordings of any kind are not permitted in the lab without prior consent. For your comfort and safety, scrubs are located inside the locker rooms where your personal belongings may be stored throughout the duration of the event. Federal law prohibits tampering with or disabling the locker of another event attendee. Our facilities are equipped with a didactic room that includes seating for both large and small groups and state-of-the-art audiovisual capabilities. A complimentary selection of beverages and snacks will be made available. For your personal comfort, we offer first-class conference rooms where you can relax and unwind, or brainstorm your next great medical advancement. Before you enter the lab, please locate and securely fasten your personal protective equipment, including gloves, gowns, and shoe covers. Make sure your masks are in the upright position. Nobody wants your mouth germs. If fluoroscopy is being used, lead vests will automatically appear in front of you. Place the vest over your shoulders, wrap the straps around your waist, and tie in the front. If you're standing next to someone requiring assistance, secure your vest first, then assist the other person. Each lab is equipped with overhead lighting, proper medical equipment, instrumentation, and tissue tailored to meet your specific needs. Our facilities offer highly functional lab space for larger and smaller, more intimate events. This may vary depending on location selected. Should your event require scans, we have scanners available. Scanners may vary based on your preferred event location. Each lab comes complete with a personal set of highly trained clinical laboratory event stewards. Be nice to them, and they will be nice to you. Event stewards will remain in the lab throughout your course, ready to assist with anything you might need. Don't hesitate to call on them if you need assistance. On behalf of our Client Services Department and our US-based events crew, thank you for choosing Science Care for your event needs. As always, we're here to make sure your experience is first class.
Yeah, they look real serious about their experiments that they're doing with organ donations and body parts and brains and heads, because all these heads were heading there. I wonder what they could have been doing with it. They're making a mockery of whatever it is they do, because you can just see right in plain sight what these places are. Right? They use these places as fronts to launder and traffic certain things, just like we know what Planned Parents are for, right? We know what that organization is really used for, and why so many people have their hands in it, like Mr. Gates Sr. and many others who are in positions of political power, who just happen to worship, the devil, who also just happens to enjoy these ceremonies that involve drinking of blood and sacrifice. So that's pretty interesting, right? So we just had a truck of heads hijacked. And of course, they talked about it on Saturday Night Live. They talked about it in the mainstream media making light of it. They're just like, who would steal these human heads? Because they don't want people to think too deep into why somebody would take a truck filled with human heads instead of taking a truck maybe filled with, well, back in the day it was stereos. I don't think they're worth much anymore, but a truck filled with flat screen TVs or appliances, Instead they would target a truck with skulls, right? Because clearly it was a targeted act. I mean, you don't just walk down the road and say, this is a truck, you want to go rob the truck? Yeah, we'll go rob the truck. We'll risk going to jail for 10 years, we'll rob the truck. And then you open up the truck, you're like, well, what are in the boxes? I'm like, who cares? Let's just take them. And then you get home and it just happens to be human heads of all things. Yeah, and it's not really how it works. Clearly this was targeted because a ritual was going to be performed. So a box of human heads stolen from a truck that was transporting the body parts for medical research. Like I said, the theft occurred Thursday at 11 a.m. when the Denver police said someone broke into the box truck and took a cardboard box of human remains as well as a dolly. Inside the box, human heads, as you heard. Science Cares, the program for donating bodies to science, to help improve specific scientific research and education. They said it's pretty shocking. I guess I don't see too many strange things happening around here usually. But you never know, said a local resident who moved to Denver's Central Park neighborhood about 3 years ago. Wow, I would have been terrified, he says. Yeah, well, let me tell you, buddy, you'd be real terrified if you knew what your political leaders and your heroes in Hollywood were really doing. If you're terrified by that, by people stealing a truck with boxes of heads, if you only knew what happens, especially with what goes on at Planned Parenthood, well, it gets worse in Hollywood and worse in the White House. So just, maybe if you're terrified of that, you might want to step back. And probably this is really why a lot of people, when they hear us talk about this stuff, they don't want to believe it because it's too terrifying for their brains to comprehend. So Fields could only guess as to where the body parts were headed. He said, well, my wife does PhD research in Colorado. He said, so cadavers are definitely utilized in certain situations. I'm assuming that's probably the case. Still questions remain where the truck was going, why was it parked, but police said they can confirm the trucks were headed to Science Care being used for medical research. Neighbors, meanwhile, are wondering whether the suspect intended to steal their remains or something else entirely. So far, no arrests have been made. Well, I don't think any arrests will be made, right? If they are, I'm sure they'll likely be pardoned, right? I mean, it's just unbelievable. The weird, satanic, when these things occur, it's like, how do people not think that some type of ritual could potentially be involved? What in the world would a regular civilian need with a box of human heads? And if the only answer you can come up with is, oops, he stole the wrong boxes, so he carried all these boxes filled with human heads, not one for 1 second, because it's a truck filled with boxes, okay? Think about unloading a moving truck. This isn't like a box in a truck and you just grab it out of somebody's trunk if you're a thief. This is like an operation where it's like, okay, we need to get all of this and then we need to load it into our truck or load it into a van, right? You would think someone would say, okay, before we do all this heavy lifting and it's going to take time so you might get caught, we should make sure that the valuables are inside the box that we're seeking. Well, clearly they knew what was inside the box. And the Beltane's right around the corner, so it could be used for something like that. But pretty much these people do rituals at will. They don't even need holidays like the Beltane to do these types of things because they're always performing them every day. Full moons, blood moons, harvest moons, you name it. But we're the crazy ones because when people hear stories like this, they just immediately don't use their brain and they're like, oops, they didn't know what they took. They didn't know. Right. And then if you're like, oh, well, they did know, then you need to use your brain and say, well, what would they do with human heads? Who are the only people that we've heard throughout history who use severed skulls in rituals? I don't know. Who happens to use a goat head all the time in their rituals? I mean, like the Rolling Stone album cover where they show it to you when there's crime scenes that involve witchcraft and they try to say, oh, they were in the Satanist command. They go, that has nothing to do with what we practice. That's just, they must have seen that in a movie somewhere, right? And everybody dismisses it, right? Yeah, I don't know. The only people I've ever heard who would have anything to do with severed skulls would be, Satanists, but they'll probably want you to think it's like some type of Jeffrey Dahmer fetish, some CIA op, right? It is, I guess, in the sense of CIA op, but just ridiculous stuff. Welcome to the world we live in. Man. Even the fact that we have companies that do medical research on things like this, I get it to a point, but at the same time, it's like, Is it really necessary? I mean, were people, when the disciples were here, were they like, hey, so and so passed away last night? Oh yeah, let's get his body, and I'm gonna do some experiments on his brain. Anyone want to cut off his right arm and do some experiments with it? Like, huh? What? Obviously not. But now we're so advanced as a society. This is what people believe we want to do. It's like they look at the brain. They're like, oh, well, we're trying to find out if they have CTE or any of these. They took blows to the head, and if it affected them, it gave them trauma. It's like, well, I don't know. If you're a pro wrestler and you get hit in the head with a steel chair every week, I don't think you need to do research on the brain to know that the brain is probably affected in some way, right? Or a football player or something like that. But of course, they use science as a front to get away with all the harvesting of organs and brains and all that stuff. So people just believe whatever they hear, and we're well aware of that at this point.